Jake Paul, standing before the biggest challenge in his life, ready to take on one of the most legendary heavyweights in history. Despite the difference in age, Mike Tyson is still one of the most ruthless knockout artists, and this time it won't be any different. Can Jake Paul make the biggest upset in Tyson's pro boxing history? Or will the older master of the craft beat the younger generation? Tyson, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, is a legendary figure known for his terrifying punches and charismatic personality. Now he's coming out of retirement to remind the younger generation of what real boxing is all about. Despite his age, Tyson's spirit remains strong, and he's not to be underestimated. While some criticize Paul for choosing weaker opponents, facing a 57-year-old Tyson is seen as another easy match for him. However, counting out the ruthless knockout artist from the 90s would be a mistake. Perhaps Tyson will be the one to silence the doubters and teach Paul a lesson in the ring. But whether Tyson can defeat Paul remains to be seen. But for now, fans eagerly anticipate the showdown. As we wait for the fight, let's remember Tyson's tough upbringing and his journey through boxing. After officially retiring in 2005, Tyson returned for a series of exhibition fights against other veterans. Mike Tyson believed he lost his fighting spirit after facing Corey Sanders in 2005. He quickly settled his debts and retired, leaving fans puzzled. Over the years, Tyson went to explore different ventures. He starred in the movie The Hangover in 2008, built centers for underprivileged children, and co-founded a boxing promotion in 2013. Initially, Tyson spoke disparagingly about his boxing career, feeling it was meaningless. He focused on his children's happiness instead. However, around the mid-2010s, Tyson's attitude shifted. He regained his physical fitness and started resembling his former self. In a surprising turn of events, in 2020, Tyson announced his return to the ring at the age of 50 to face fellow sports legend Roy Jones Jr. In preparation for his highly anticipated comeback, Mike Tyson crossed paths with young YouTube sensation Jake Paul for the first time. Paul, just starting his boxing journey, had only one fight under his belt, against another internet personality. His interest in boxing stemmed from following his older brother, Logan, a pioneer in YouTube boxing. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, Paul found an opponent in famous basketball player Nate Robinson for a match scheduled alongside Tyson's bout against Roy Jones Jr. This unexpected connection brought Paul into Tyson's circle. Despite Robinson's aggressive style in the opening of the fight, Jake Paul maintained a high guard. Robinson rushed in, but Paul caught him with a counterpunch, knocking him down. Nate got back up, but Jake knocked him out in the second round with a powerful hook. Paul liked the attention he was getting and went on to call out big names like Conor McGregor and Dylan Denise. Meanwhile, at the other main card, two veteran champions, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., faced off. Tyson went for body shots while Jones tried to keep his distance. The fight went all 8 rounds, ending in a draw, but it felt like Tyson had the edge. Both fighters were happy they could go the distance. Fans enjoyed the fights and were glad to see the champs back in action. But for Tyson and Jones, it seemed like this was a one-time thing. Jake Paul, on the other hand, was just getting started. He had more fights and achievements ahead, starting with his bout against UFC fighter Ben Askren in 2021. Jake Paul, feeling like he was living in a dream, knocked out the MMA veteran quickly. This victory boosted Jake's confidence, making him feel invincible for a while, though he wasn't in the mood for interviews afterward. After basking in the glory for a bit, Jake decided on a new opponent, Tyron Woodley, another former UFC fighter. Woodley, once a feared welterweight champion, had lost his edge and was released from the UFC after a string of defeats. This time, the fight wasn't as swift. Woodley proved resilient, defending himself well and occasionally landing punches of his own. Jake, trying to box more strategically, jabbed, retreated, and targeted Woodley's body. Jake Paul started strong and took control of the rounds against Tyron Woodley. However, as the fight went on, Jake's stamina began to wane, and Woodley started to catch up. If the fight had gone on for a few more rounds, Woodley might have won. But in the 8 rounds they fought, Jake did enough to stay undefeated by the judge's decision. Jake admitted that Woodley landed some good shots, but he felt confident in his victory, especially after going the distance and lasting 8 rounds. Wanting to face tougher opponents, Jake aimed for Tommy Fury, the brother of heavyweight champ Tyson Fury. However, the fight didn't happen because Tommy Fury felt ill. Instead, Woodley, eager for redemption, stepped up for a rematch. He changed his strategy, focusing more on clinching. But Jake was prepared and countered effectively, keeping the fight on his terms. Then, in the 6th round, Jake landed a devastating right hook that knocked Woodley out cold. Meanwhile, Mike Tyson was keeping busy with his podcast, dealing with some scuffles with overzealous fans, and enjoying marijuana. During one podcast, he was asked about fighting the Paul brothers. Tyson made it clear that he wouldn't mind stepping into the ring with them if the paycheck was big enough. He recognized the massive audience they attract and saw it as a lucrative opportunity. Jake Paul's profile continued to rise with each win. He expressed interest in fighting big names like Nate Diaz and various reasons. Instead, Paul agreed to face Anderson Silva, another UFC legend who was returning to boxing. Silva had already won a decision against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., so this was his 2nd fight in boxing after MMA. Nevertheless, Paul, being younger and faster, overwhelmed Silva with his size and energy. He even managed to knock Silva down, securing a decisive victory. Tyson was once again asked about fighting Jake Paul, and he echoed his previous sentiment. It seemed like Tyson was open to the idea if the circumstances were right. In those days, Jake Paul wasn't interested in fighting Mike Tyson, despite Tyson saying he was open for the fight. Paul had built an impressive record of 6 wins and no losses, becoming extremely popular. Many fighters wanted a shot at him, given his knack for knocking out MMA veterans. However, the most enticing offer came from Tommy Fury's team. In late 2022, it was announced that Paul had agreed to fight Tommy Fury, scheduled for February 26th. This match would determine who was the stronger boxer, Fury with his boxing pedigree and famous family, or Paul, the self-taught fighter known for his explosive punches. The fight reached its climax in the 8th round when Paul knocked Fury down with a jab. But this moment wasn't enough to secure victory. Fury fought hard and ultimately won, handing Paul his first loss. Paul acknowledged Fury's skill and admitted that his own performance fell short. Losing for the first time was tough for Paul, especially mentally, but he bounced back within a few months, ready to continue his journey in the boxing world. In the spring, Jake Paul made a comeback and announced his next opponent. Nate Diaz, the fighter Jake had been eager to face after Diaz left the UFC. Jake was thrilled about this unexpected turn of events. If you've seen Nate Diaz fight before, you might have expected a different outcome. In their bout, Diaz took a lot of hits early on, barely landing any punches himself. He seemed like a punching bag. Towards the end of the fight, Diaz picked up the pace, throwing more jabs and engaging in clinches. However, he didn't pose much of a threat overall and essentially handed the victory to Jake. Reflecting on the fight, Jake mentioned that he was patient and strategic, not wanting to tire out and give Diaz a chance to come back strong. He was looking for the perfect moment to finish the fight. Despite taking some heavy punches, Diaz managed to endure. After this fight, Jake appeared on Mike Tyson's podcast to discuss future plans. He expressed interest in a rematch with Tommy Fury, but wasn't considering Tyson as an opponent at that time. Unfortunately, a rematch with Tommy Fury didn't materialize because Tommy had other commitments. After missing out on a lucrative rematch with Tommy Fury, Jake Paul turned his attention to facing lesser-known professional boxers. Despite their decent records, Paul dispatched them with ease, showcasing his dominance in the ring. He even boldly declared himself the face of boxing, which some found amusing. In his most recent fight on March 2nd, Paul once again emerged victorious. But before anyone could catch their breath, he announced his next bout, a showdown with none other than Mike Tyson himself. This news sent shockwaves through the boxing world. Scheduled for July 20th, the fight between Paul and Tyson was hyped up from the get-go. Tyson showcased his remarkable shape and speed in training videos, while also issuing warnings to Paul. In response, Paul created parody clips of Tyson's infamous interviews, adding to the anticipation. While Tyson may be older and past his prime, his dedication to training and serious demeanor suggest he still has the skills to back up his talk. Whether the legend can defeat the outspoken Paul remains to be seen, but the prospect of this showdown has fans eagerly awaiting the summer.